The grand lobby of First National Bank was buzzing with customers. Fancy suits, shiny shoes, and the sound of money being counted filled the air. Then, the doors creaked open. An old black man in tattered clothes shuffled in, dragging a dirty, bulging sack behind him. His face was wrinkled like old leather, but his eyes burned with something strange. Power. He walked straight to the manager's desk and slammed the sack down. "This bank belongs to me now," he said, his voice calm but firm. Silence. Then, the laughter started. The bank manager, a tall man in a slick suit, snorted, the security guards clutched their stomachs. Even the customers giggled behind their hands. "Old man, go home before we call the police," the manager sneered. But the old man just smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. Then he reached into his sack. Boom. A sound like thunder shook the bank. The lights flickered. The laughter died instantly. Because what the old man pulled out of that sack was impossible. And in that moment, every single person in that bank knew. They had made a terrible mistake. The entire bank froze. All eyes were locked on the old man's hand, still buried deep inside the sack. The air grew thick, like before a storm. Even the arrogant manager's smirk had vanished. "You think this is a joke?" the old man whispered. His voice was low, but it carried like a judge's sentence. "You laugh at an old man, but you don't even know who I am." A nervous teller dropped a stack of cash. The sound made everyone flinch. The old man's fingers tightened around something inside the sack. The room held its breath. Then, riot. A security guard lunged forward, grabbing the sack. "Enough of this madness," he barked, yanking it away. The old man didn't fight back. He just smiled wider. The guard triumphantly upended the sack, shaking it over the marble floor. But nothing came out. The crowd gasped. The sack was empty. "What kind of trick is this?" the manager shouted, face turning red. The old man chuckled, slow and dark. "Oh, it's no trick." He pointed a bony finger at the guard. "But you just made the biggest mistake of your life." The guard frowned, then suddenly clutched his chest. His face twisted in pain. He collapsed to his knees, gasping. "What did you do to him?" a woman screamed. The old man bent down, picking up his sack. "I didn't do anything," he said softly. "The bank did." Then he turned to the terrified crowd. "You all work here. You live here. You trust this place. But do you even know what's buried beneath it?" A cold silence filled the room. Because now, they were starting to remember. The rumors. The whispers about First National Bank's dark past. About the land it was built on. About the missing people. And about the one man who vowed revenge. The guard writhed on the floor, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His skin was turning gray, like old newspaper left in the sun. Help me," he choked out, clawing at his throat. The bank manager stumbled back, knocking over a chair. "Call an ambulance. Now." But the old man just watched, his face unreadable. "Too late," he murmured. "The bank always collects what it's owed." The guard's body jerked violently, then went still. His wide, glassy eyes stared at the ceiling. "Dead." A woman screamed. A man vomited in a potted plant. The manager's hands shook as he fumbled with his phone. Then, crack. The sound came from beneath the floor. Like something deep underground had just shifted. The old man's smile returned. "Hear that? The bank is hungry again." He turned to the terrified crowd, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You think money is the only thing this place owns? You're wrong. Every loan, every signature, every soul that walked through these doors, the bank remembers. And now, it's time to settle accounts. A cold wind blew through the room, even though all the windows were closed. The manager's phone shattered in his hand. The old man tilted his head. Who's next? Panic exploded through the bank. Customers scrambled toward the exits, only to find the doors locked tight. No amount of pushing or kicking made them budge. The old man sighed, shaking his head. Running won't help. The bank owns you now. Then, his milky eyes locked onto the bank manager. You. The manager's breath hitched. And me? I didn't do anything. The old man's laugh was like dry leaves crumbling. You approved the loans. You took the homes. You buried the truth. He tapped the side of his sack. And now, you'll pay. The manager's gold watch clicked open on its own, the time wasn't moving. No, no, he begged, backing away. But then, his shadow stretched too long. It slithered up the wall, without him. The manager screamed as his own shadow wrapped around his throat and yanked him off his feet. His expensive shoes kicked air as he was dragged into the vault. The heavy metal door slammed shut behind him. Silence. Then, a wet, crunching sound. The old man turned to the remaining customers, his sack swaying gently. Who else owes a debt? A young teller, tears streaming down her face, fell to her knees. Please. I just started working here last month. I didn't know. The old man studied her, then nodded. You're free to go. The front doors creaked open just for her. She bolted outside, gasping in the sunlight. The old man's gaze swept over the others. The rest of you, you knew. You took. You lied. He opened his sack wider. Now, the bank takes back. The remaining customers and staff huddled together, their fear turning into something darker, desperation. A muscular businessman in a torn suit stepped forward, his fists clenched. This is crazy. We're not just gonna stand here and die. The others murmured in agreement. A security guard, the only one left, pulled out his gun with shaking hands. Why yeah. Whatever magic this is, bullets don't care. The old man sighed, almost disappointed. Fighting the bank? Foolish. But, go ahead. Try. The guard fired. Bang. 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 The bullets froze in mid-air, then turned into rusty coins that clattered to the floor. The old man didn't even blink. The bank owns everything here, even the metal in your gun. The businessman roared and charged, swinging a chair. Crack. His arm bent backward, bones snapping like dry twigs. He screamed as an invisible force lifted him off the ground. No. Please. And slammed him through the glass teller's window. Shards embedded in his skin as he crumpled, bleeding and whimpering. The old man stepped closer, his sack now humming with energy. Anyone else? A woman in the back suddenly gasped, clutching her chest. Her credit card melted in her pocket, burning through her clothes. She collapsed, writhing as her skin turned the color of old, moldy dollar bills. The old man nodded. Ah. Overdue. The last few survivors backed away, sobbing. One man fell to his knees, pulling out his wallet in shaking hands. Take it. Take all my money. Just let me go. The old man's smile faded. Money? You still don't understand. He opened his sack wide. And the walls began to bleed. Dark, inky liquid seeped from the ceiling. The bank's logo on the wall peeled away, revealing something older and hungrier underneath. The old man's voice echoed like a graveside whisper. The bank doesn't want your money. It wants your name. The air grew thick as spoiled milk. The last 5 survivors clutched each other, watching in horror as the inky blackness dripped from the ceiling, forming words on the floor. "Sign here." A banker with slicked back hair whimpered, pointing at the oozing letters. That's my signature. From the loan documents." "How is it?" The old man didn't move. "Every contract you forced folks to sign, the bank kept copies. In blood." Suddenly. Splorch. The banker's right hand twisted violently, fingers snapping into a perfect pen-holding position against his will. His scream turned gargled as his own tie wrapped around his throat, dragging him forward toward the black ooze. "No. No. I'll give back the money. I'll." His forced hand touched the liquid. Fwoosh. Flames erupted, but burned blue and cold. The banker's shrieks turned muffled as his skin peeled away, revealing rows and rows of tiny typed letters underneath. James R. Holloway. The name detached from his bones, floating into the old man's sack as the banker's body collapsed into a pile of blank paper. The old man sighed, weighing the sack. "One down." He turned to the others. "Who's next?" A teenage intern clutched her employee badge, tears streaming. I never signed anything. I just made coffee." The old man studied her badge, then plucked her name straight off the plastic. Lisa M. The letters turned to worms in his palm before dissolving into the sack. The intern gasped as her memories ripped away, her face went slack, her eyes empty. She wandered toward the vault, humming, a nameless shell. The last 3 survivors backed against a wall. One whispered, "We gotta burn this place down." The old man's head snapped toward them. Oh. The lights went out. The last 3 survivors huddled together in the darkness, their breath coming in ragged gasps. The only sound was the wet sloshing of the old man's sack as he stepped closer. "You want to see?" he whispered, his voice like rustling receipts. "You want to know what your greed has fed?" With a slow, deliberate motion, he opened the sack wide. And the bank screamed. Not a human scream. Not an animal's. This was the sound of 1,000 debts being called in at once, a noise that vibrated in their teeth, their bones, their souls. Inside the sack was no object, no monster, no gold. It was worse. It was every contract ever signed in blood. Every name stolen. Every life crushed under unfair interest. Every soul the bank had swallowed since its founding. Floating, swirling, screaming in silence. The oldest survivor, a lone officer named Carl, fell to his knees. "Oh God. I processed those files. I didn't know. I didn't want to know." The sack pulsed like a sick heart. The old man's eyes gleamed. "The bank was never yours. It was always ours. Built on land where they buried us. Funded with blood money. And now." He reached into the swirling void of names. And pulled out a rusted shackle. Time to repay. The walls peeled back, revealing brickwork made of bones. The floor cracked open, exhaling the smell of old iron and rotting promises. And from the darkness beneath the bank, something began to climb out. The ground trembled as blackened fingers clawed up from the cracks in the floor, not bones, not ghosts, but something worse. The unpaid. Their bodies were stitched together from default notices and foreclosure papers, skin pulsing with glowing red numbers, interest rates still compounding. Their mouths stretched too wide, filled not with teeth but with tiny, screaming signatures. The nearest one lumbered toward Carl, the lone officer. "Why you?" it gurgled, its voice the sound of 100 overdraft fees. "You approved my eviction, then bought my daughter's piano at auction." Carl screamed as the creature's paper-cut fingers sliced into his chest. And began filling him with receipts. His body bloated, his skin stretching as transaction records forced themselves under his flesh. His last choked words, "I was just following policy," before his eyes popped like over-stamped checks, leaving hollow sockets that dripped ink. The remaining two survivors, a janitor and a cashier, staggered back as more unpaid rose. One wore a noose of red tape. Another had coins for eyes, spinning wildly. A child-sized one crawled on all fours, its back branded, "Collateral." The old man watched, his sack now hovering mid-air, its mouth stretching wider as the bank's true structure revealed itself. Walls of slave ledgers. Vault doors made of plantation deeds. ATMs that dispensed teeth. The cashier, Maria, grabbed the janitor's arm. "The boiler room. There's a way under the foundation. My granddaddy helped build this place," he whispered about an exit. The old man's head snapped toward her. "Clever girl." The unpaid hissed in unison, their paper skin fluttering. Maria and the janitor, Jamal, sprinted toward the boiler room, their shoes slipping on ink-black puddles that grasped at their ankles like sticky fingers. Behind them, the unpaid shrieked, their paper limbs flapping like cursed origami as they gave chase. Maria kicked open the boiler room door. And stopped dead. The room wasn't a room at all. It was a throat. Wet, ribbed walls pulsed around them. Copper pipes dripped something too dark to be water. And at the far end, where the furnace should have been, a massive vault door stood, covered in teeth. Jamal gagged. "This ain't right, this ain't human." Maria's eyes locked onto a rusted grate in the floor. "There," Granddaddy said, "the old drainage tunnels. They lead." Slam. The door behind them slammed shut, sealing them in with the sound of the unpaid scratching outside. The vault door at the far end creaked open an inch. A wispy, ink-stained hand slid out, beckoning. A voice, too sweet, too familiar, cooed from the darkness. "Come, child. Let's discuss your overdraft." Maria's hands flew to her ears. "No. That's the voice from the loan commercials. The one that..." Jamal grabbed her arm, dragging her toward the grate. "Don't listen. Lift this thing with me." They pried at the rusted metal, their fingers bleeding, as the walls around them began to peel away, revealing layer after layer of old mortgage agreements, all signed in the same looping handwriting. The grate gave way. A rush of cold, damp air hit their faces. Freedom? Maria didn't hesitate. She jumped down first, into the black. Jamal followed. But as he fell, something snagged his wrist. The old man's voice echoed from above. "The bank always keeps one collateral." Snap. The grate slammed shut above Maria as Jamal's scream was cut off mid-air. She landed hard in a tunnel, alone, the sound of dripping water her only company. And then, a whisper from the darkness ahead. "First National thanks you for your business." Maria's hands shook as she stared at her phone. The screen flickered, the notification changing. First National Bank alert. Current balance, 1 sol. Payment due, now. She dropped the phone, but it didn't hit the ground. Instead, it floated mid-air, the screen glowing brighter, casting her shadow taller and darker against the alley wall. And then, her shadow stepped forward without her. Maria tried to scream, but her voice was gone, swallowed by the same silence that had taken Jamal. Her legs moved on their own, carrying her back toward the bank's glowing doors as her mind screamed. "No! No! I almost made it." Inside, the old man waited at a teller's window, his sack now pulsing like a heartbeat. The other customers didn't look up, because they weren't customers at all. They were like her. Eyes blank. Bodies stiff. Signing papers without reading. The old man pushed forward a document, the words, "Final payment," stamped in what looked like rust. Just a signature, Maria, he said, holding out a pen that dripped something dark. Then you can leave. Her hand moved on its own. The pen touched paper. And as the ink sank in, Maria finally remembered. She had signed something like this before. Years ago. When her grandmother's house was taken. When she was too young to read the fine print. The old man leaned closer, his breath cold as a vault door sliding shut. The bank always wins, because everyone borrows someday. He lifted his sack. And Maria's last thought before the darkness took her was, how many branches are there?